Hello. Now you're ready to start on the last part of the key assessment, creating a developmentally appropriate schedule. So far, you have done some research on what the activity center should look like in a high-quality classroom, and hopefully you've had a chance to get into a classroom and do some observations to see how the classroom is set up, how their activity centers are stocked, as well as pay attention to their daily schedule. So now you're going to have the opportunity to write your own. So, a well-planned, developmentally appropriate schedule includes routine care activities, which would be things like snack, nap, outside time, going to the bathroom, opportunities for varied interactions between children as well as the teacher and the children, and flexible, hands-on, child-directed, meaningful explorations with varied materials and equipment. And you're going to find that when you write your schedule, you're going to need to have all of these incorporated into your schedule. So, in early childhood programs, lessons and activities are mostly provided to small groups or individuals rather than in large group formats. So for most of the day, children are going to be in charge. They're going to be the ones who have choice when it comes to the activity centers that they go to. So teachers are going to position themselves within the centers to interact with a few children at a time. This is not a time when a teacher is going to be doing direct instruction. Instead, while they are interacting with children in the activity centers, they're going to allow the child to be the one to direct the conversation and the play, and the teacher is just going to be a guide. So, for the purposes of this assignment, you are going to create a schedule where your classroom is open from 6:30 in the morning until 6 o'clock in the evening. You're creating your schedule for 3 to 4-year-olds, so this is going to basically be a preschool schedule. And so some children will be arriving at 6:30 in the morning and some are going to be leaving at 6 o'clock in the evening. What that means for you is you're going to want to have a staggered arrival time, which means that there are no whole group activities going on at the very beginning of the day, and the same thing for the departure time. Because children are going to be coming and going at different times, you want to allow time in your arrival and your departure where children are going to have access to different centers that are going to be open based on what you would like them to be able to do during those times. And as we go through this presentation, I'm going to show you samples of a schedule and point out the different things that should be on your schedule. So, before you begin this assignment, you will find in Blackboard under the schedule assignment, there is a PowerPoint called a closer look at schedules. You're going to want to go through this before you start creating your own schedule because it's going to give you a lot of very, very important information that you'll use not only for creating your schedule, but for answering the challenge questions that are found at the end of the assignment. Once you have everything completed, you're going to submit it through Blackboard just as you've done with all of your other assignments. So, some important words that you're going to need to know in order to complete this schedule successfully is substantial portion of the day. And you're going to see the abbreviation SPD from here on out. And basically what substantial portion of the day means is that children should have free access to all centers for at least a third of the operating hours of the center. And as we go through this PowerPoint, you're going to see that there is a calculator that you can use to determine how much time children should be having in the centers. So basically, one of the first things that you need to do is determine how long the center is open, and that's where you're going to start figuring out how much time children should have access to the centers. So, Again, here are some more instructions for you, just kind of a review. You're going to see not only substantial portion of the day, but you're also going to see something called minimal access, which is low quality, versus substantial portion of the day, which is high quality. Just a reminder that this is going to be for preschool ages and that you're going to want to review the PowerPoint before you start doing your own schedule. So if you look on this slide, this is what your schedule form looks like. And so I've kind of highlighted a few things for you. This column 1, is where you actually write the time. And please make sure that you write in the time range. So for instance, if your arrival time is going to be from 6:30 to 8:30, you need to write 6:30 to 8:30 in that block. Don't just put 6:30, because then it's going to be hard to calculate how much time the children are in the different centers. Column 2 is where you are going to write down what's happening during that time block. So whether it's arrival, whether it's snack, whether it's outside time, whether it's nap, column 2 is going to be where you list what's happening during that time. The rest of the columns are all of the different activity centers that children can have access to. And so you're going to need to pay attention to those as you go, so that you know which centers you want children to go into. At the bottom of your schedule, you will find 3 different rows that are going to have the times in there. And so the first one that I have circled is the SPD. And this is where you're going to find out, based on the calculator, how much time children should have access to the centers, and you simply write that number in the blank. And when we get to that calculator, I'll point that out to you. The one on the bottom is the minimal access. And again, there's a calculator for that, and you basically just fill in those numbers there. The only thing that's going to be a little bit different is this column right here, where you're actually going to tally your own time amounts. The SPD and the minimal access, those are already calculated for you. But you are going to have to tally each of your columns to find out if you are making substantial portion of the day or not. So here we go. Step 1 is to take out the schedule form. All of these forms are on Blackboard for you. There is a blank schedule form, there is a schedule sample, and there's a schedule template. So you're going to want to probably print out at least one of the blank schedule forms so that you can start kind of rough sketching it out to see how things are going to look. Again, please remember this is preschool children and it's open from 6:30 to 6. Just a reminder, the time blocks goes in column 1, and in column 2, that's where you're going to record what activity is taking place during that particular time frame. So for step 2, you are going to want to look across the top where all of the different activity centers are listed. And every time that children are going to have access to that center, you're going to have to fill in the amount of time that they are going to be in that center. So if you look at this example, if between 8:30 and 9:30 children have access to fine motor, they have access to books, and they have access to drawing materials, which would be art, then you're going to record 1 hour in the time blocks under fine motor, books, and art. And as we get to the sample, I'll show you how that's going. So this slide, for whatever reason, became much, much larger than it needed to be. But basically all this is telling you is that on the very next slide, I'm going to show you the substantial portion of the day calculator. So here it is. Here's the calculator. And if you go to the regular PowerPoint, you'll be able to see all of the hours and the SPD. Again, for some reason, this cut it off, but this will at least give you an idea of how to use it. So what you do is first you have to calculate the amount of time that the center is open. And so please remember for this one, you're going from 6:30 in the morning to 6 o'clock at night. So once you have determined how long the center is open, then all you basically have to do is follow the dots across, and it tells you what your substantial portion of the day should be. So if you look at the very first one, you will see that for a center that is open for 4 hours, the substantial portion of the day is 1 hour and 20 minutes, which basically means that when you're adding up your columns, for a 4-hour program, you're going to want to make sure that children have access to those centers for at least 1 hour and 20 minutes. So when you're ready to start filling in your own schedule, you can refer back to the calculator and find the time that your center is open, and then follow the dots across, and that will tell you your substantial portion of the day. Once you have figured out that number, that's where you're going to go onto your schedule, and in the row that says SPD high quality access amounts, you're simply going to fill in that number. So for instance, if we're looking back at the 4-hour time block, the substantial portion of the day is 1 hour and 20 minutes. So all I would do is I would write 1 hour and 20 minutes in all of these blanks. You will notice there are 2 columns that do not require substantial portion of the day. One of them is music, and the other one is gross motor, which is the outside time. And we'll talk about the gross motor a little bit farther throughout this presentation. But once you've figured out your substantial portion of the day, go ahead and fill in that number in the row on your schedule form so that part is done. So the next thing you're going to calculate is the minimal access. And basically all minimal access means is that in order for a center to get any kind of credit for giving children free choice in the different activity centers, there's a minimum amount of time that they must meet. Ideally, we're going for substantial portion of the day, but it is important to know what's the minimum amount of time if I'm going to get any credit for allowing children access in these centers. And so the next column, the next slide is going to show us how to calculate the minimal access. So this calculator is much simpler than the substantial portion of the day. Basically, once you have figured out how long your center is open, all you have to do is then look and see what's the corresponding number of minutes that children should have access to the centers. If you look in this last column, this is for centers that are open from 8 hours on. So 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours, 14 hours, anything from 8 on is going to require 60 minutes of minimal access. And so when you go back to your schedule form, you'll be able to fill in that row as well, and that's on the next. So here we go with the minimal access. So for this one, all you are going to have to do is write 60 there and in every single one of these blanks. So obviously 60 is the least amount of time that children should have access to the centers, but we really want to go for the substantial portion of the day. So now that you have determined substantial portion of the day and minimum access, now you can start filling in your own schedule. So after you complete columns 1 and 2, you write in the time amounts for each one of the activity columns. Then you're going to add up each column and write that number in that top row where it asks you to tally your own amounts. So you're going to want to look and see, does your schedule give children minimal access or substantial portion of the day? If you do not have at least substantial portion of the day, then you're going to want to go back and do a little bit more revisions on it until you get to substantial portion of the day. One thing that is important to note is that it is perfectly fine to go over the substantial portion of the day. So for instance, with our 4-hour example, it's fine if they have 1 hour and 40 minutes instead of the 1 hour and 20 minutes, but they are not going to get credit for substantial portion of the day if they only have an hour. So you're striving for substantial portion of the day, but you want that to be the least amount. You are going to find that some of your centers are going to go well above that, simply because during your arrival time and during your departure time, you are deciding that only a few centers are going to be open. And when we get to the schedule sample, I'll show you what that looks like. So this is what's going to happen. If you see, I have circled where you would tally the time amounts, and basically all you're going to do is you're going to add your columns going down, and that's where you're going to fill in the access time. So once you've done that, the last thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to make sure that you review the PowerPoint again, because that's going to help you answer the challenge questions. There's 3 challenge questions, and they're on the next slide for you. So the first challenge question is basically explaining to me what should the teacher be doing while the children are in the learning activity centers. Not only that, but what learning is taking place during the time that the children are in the activity centers, and why is the learning that's taking place during centers more developmentally appropriate than having whole group activities or worksheets. The second question is asking you to provide an analysis of the difference between substantial portion of the day and much of the day, as well as describing the different requirements in an infant toddler schedule versus a preschool schedule. And that information is going to be found in that PowerPoint. So it's very important that you go through it thoroughly so that you can answer that question completely. And then finally, your last one is just simply playing around with the calculator a little bit. There are 3 questions. You can only see 1 on here, but basically what I've done is I've given you a time frame, and I'm asking you to figure out what would substantial portion of the day be for a center that is open from those hours. So when you look at this first one, what I want to know is what is the substantial portion of the day for a center that's open from 8 o'clock until 12 o'clock. And that is 8 o'clock in the morning until 12 o'clock noon. So here's a schedule sample. So hopefully this will kind of bring things a little bit clearer for you. So if you look, you see that we have an arrival time, and it's a staggered arrival time from 6:30 until 8:30. And so column 2 is telling me that during this time, children are having breakfast, and they are also able to go into the Cozy Center, the Fine Motor Center, and the Book Center. And so because 6:30 to 8:30 is 2 hours, all I've done is I've put 2 hours in fine motor, I've put 2 hours in cozy, and I've put 2 hours in books. Because I am saying that children are only allowed to go into those centers during my staggered arrival time, those are the only blanks that I need to fill in. The next time we have is 8:30 to 8:45, and so on this sample, this is going to be my circle time. And you will notice that none of the activity centers are filled in, and that's because children are not having access to the centers during circle time. So the only time you fill in these blanks is when children are allowed to be in those centers. The next thing you see is 8:45 to 10, and this is going to be my free time. And so you will see, because this is an hour and 15 minutes, we have put an hour and 15 minutes into every single one of the centers. Now, the only thing you will notice is that we do not have, you can't see it on this slide, but gross motor is not going to be filled in. The only time you're going to fill in gross motor is when children go outside. But anytime that children are inside and I'm giving them free choice, that means all of the centers up top are going to be available to the children. So you simply just fill in the blanks. And then what you do is you continue filling this in. You will see that it says continue and add lines as needed. You're going to need to add lines, and that's why the schedule form was created in Microsoft Word. All you have to do is go to Format, and it will allow you to insert as many additional rows as you want. And so as long as you fill it in completely, then you will be completely fine with this assignment. But once you have finished filling in every single time block that shows what happens from 6:30 in the morning until 6 o'clock at night, then all you do is you add your columns. So for instance, if I were to stop my schedule here, then I would say that for art, I have an hour and 15 minutes. But for fine motor, I actually already have 3 hours and 15 minutes. And so you just add your columns all the way down and you fill in the tally. And again, you're going to want to check and make sure that the time that you have allowed children to go to the centers is going to be at least the substantial portion of the day. So the last part of this PowerPoint is going to give you some hints of things that you're going to want to have in your developmentally appropriate schedule. So the first hint is that you're going to want to have a staggered arrival time. You're going to want your arrival time to be at least an hour and 25 minutes. Now, this says all, but actually most of us are going to put some, because you may not want children to have access to the art center at 6:30 in the morning. It's completely your choice. But your arrival time needs to be at least an hour and 25 minutes, because starting at 6:30 in the morning, you're not going to have all of your children, but probably you would have most of them by 8 o'clock. So just make sure that your arrival time is at least an hour and 25 minutes. And again, it's your choice on what centers you want children to have access to during that time. The second hint is scheduling another time for children to have access to all centers except for gross motor sometime in the mid-morning. So at least an hour and 15 minutes, and it can be before snack, it can be after snack, it can be before they go outside, it can be after they go outside. But sometime in the mid-morning, you're going to want to find a time that children can have free access to all centers. Your next hint is having another time in the afternoon for children to have free access to all centers. And so sometime after nap, you're going to want to allow at least another hour and 15 minutes where children can have free access to all of those centers. But if you notice, once you have had that time block, probably the next time that you have centers available is going to be your staggered departure, and you're probably not going to have all of your centers open then, so that you do not have to clean everything at the very end of the day. One last time block is going to be your circle time. For preschoolers, you are not going to want to have a circle time that lasts longer than 15 minutes. So sometime probably in the morning, you're going to want to schedule a circle time. And again, remember that this is not going to be a time that any of the activity centers are available to the children. So here's some last few hints. During a children's day, they normally sleep for around 2 hours, and so that's their nap time. They're going to eat several times throughout the day. They're going to have to go to the bathroom. They're going to have to wash their hands, and they're going to go outside. You are going to want to make sure that on your schedule there is at least a 30-minute outside time in the morning, as well as a 30-minute outside time in the afternoon. And then the last thing that is going to need to be on your schedule are transitions. For instance, you're not going to say that your breakfast and staggered arrival is from 6:30 a.m. to 8 a.m. and then right at 8 a.m. you're going to start circle time. Because there's going to have to be cleanup. There's going to have to be a time where children wash their hands. If you're going to take everyone to the bathroom. So you're going to want to include transitions in your schedule so that you're accounting for every minute of the day. So anytime that you're going to have children washing their hands, so when they come in from being outside, before they eat, after they wake up from their nap, every time they go to the bathroom, you're going to want to put that on your schedule, which means your schedule is probably going to be very lengthy since your center is open from 6:30 to 6, but it is better to document what is actually happening at every moment of the day so that parents, directors, raters can come in and know what's going on. As we all know, children thrive on routine and schedules, and so it's important that we really take the time to determine how to write a developmentally appropriate schedule. So that's all the information about how to do this schedule assignment. I have provided a template for you, and this is what it looks like. When you go onto Blackboard, you will see a file that's called Schedule Template. And all it is, it's 2 pages. I've given you the schedule form. And remember, you're going to need to add rows because there's not enough for you to fill everything in. And then here are your challenge questions. So just make sure that you have completed the schedule as well as answered all of the challenge questions before you submit your assignment in Blackboard. And finally, here's the rubric. So make sure that you look this over before you submit your assignment. As long as your schedule is developmentally appropriate, you've met substantial portion of the day, and you have answered the challenge questions thoroughly with enough detail to let me know that you did not only read the PowerPoint, but you're using the information from your other assignments, like the activity centers and the observation, then you can rest assured that you're going to do just fine on this assignment. So, as always, if you have any questions about completing this assignment, please don't hesitate to email me. But I hope that you find that having the narration helps you be able to complete these assignments a little bit easier. Have fun, and I can't wait to see all of your schedules.